comrades, I'm happy to be with you. Unfortunately, not in person there in Athens, but at least online. Many greetings from the former Soviet Republic of Belarus, and I'm sure our country will be Soviet in the future. The world is experiencing another crisis of capitalism, which is becoming more and more acute and is already manifesting itself in the armed confrontation between Russia and NATO in Ukraine and Donbass. We see the war in Ukraine as a manifestation of a systemic crisis of capitalism, and we will explain why. Capitalism has long been a reactionary social system that not only hinders the further development of human society, but also brings it countless misfortunes and disasters. Almost every country in the world is involved in the capitalist system of the world economy. Capital has penetrated into every corner of the planet and is sucking surplus value out of individual workers as well as whole countries and nations for its main goal of self-growth. But the field of application of capital is limited by the physical size of the planet and its population. There is a limit to the further expansion of capital and the growth of profits. Imperialism, as the highest stage of capitalism, is in crisis. And the world hegemon, the US, is looking for a way to overcome it while maintaining the existing system and its dominance. And this method has long been known and repeatedly tested. American imperialism needs a big war, which will destroy the mass of means of production and goods, which will allow to seize the markets of raw materials and distribution, which will clear the way for the investment of capital for its self-growth. The participation of the US and Western European countries in the war in Ukraine is not hidden. It is NATO that is at war there, and it is aimed at Russia and subsequently at China. In this military confrontation, we see a clear formation of a second pole in the unipolar world that has existed for 3 decades. Against the West, the East has risen. Yes, the East is not socialist, it is capitalist, but it opposes the world terrorist, the USA, and its servants at this stage of history. Moreover, to be more specific about the war in Ukraine, Russia is confronting fascism, the greatest evil of mankind. Russia is now the only country in the world that is waging an armed struggle against fascism. This is its undoubtedly progressive role, even though Russia is a capitalist state. But this progressive role is disputed by many leftists, including those who call themselves communists and Marxists. Their logic is as follows. Both Russia and the USA and Western Europe are imperialist countries, and their clash in Ukraine is nothing but an imperialist war. That is an unjust war, an aggressive war, according to the Lenin's classification of wars. But first, Russia is not an imperialist country. After the destruction of the USSR, it was relegated to the position of a neo-colony of the imperialist states of the West. And only decades later, it began to try to conduct more or less independent of its masters' policies. to restore industrial and agricultural production. That is, there is a process of liberation from neo-colonial slavery, which doesn't yet make Russia an imperialist country. And secondly, if you take Lenin's classification of wars, the war in Ukraine for Russia turns out to be just war. The purpose of this war on the Russian side is to protect the people of Russia and Donbass from external attack and enslavement, and at the same time it aims at the final liberation of Russia from the oppression of the imperialists. With all this, of course, we do not deny the presence of the interests of the Russian big bourgeoisie in this war, and even apparently the prevalence of these interests at the beginning of the special military operation. But objectively, the situation is such that other goals of this war have come to the fore, which make it for Russia and its multinational people a just war, anti-fascist, requiring the full support of the progressive forces of the world. Belarus is also taking part in this war, as President Alexander Lukashenko has openly said. But this participation doesn't imply the participation of the Belarusian military on the territory of Ukraine, and such participation is fully justified. Belarus is Russia's closest ally and a country that has resisted the neoliberal world order and attempts to subjugate it to the imperialists for 3 decades. Therefore, the choice on which side to be on was predetermined for Belarus. At the same time, the Belarusian military is not involved in the war, since Belarus itself is in immediate danger of military invasion by NATO and has to be constant alert. The war in Ukraine threatens to turn into a world war, which American imperialism desperately needs. The consequences of such a war could be catastrophic for all mankind. We therefore believe that progressive forces must work to end this war with the defeat of NATO in it. The defeat of the imperialist side in this war will greatly weaken imperialism, which directly serves the interests of the people of the world and enables the communists to build up the revolutionary forces for the further struggle for the social revolution and for the communism. Thank you for your attention, comrades.